Thank you for joining me. The soap operas of earthly experience. We are all very familiar with the dramas that can unfold in this life, with ourselves, with others. Many conflicts can play out when we're not paying good enough attention, when we're letting ourselves get sloppy in our manifestations. Most of us don't like soap operas. I mean, maybe they're fun to play out for a little bit, but conflict is so exhausting, isn't it? And if we're all honest with ourselves, none of us really want to be in conflict. We might feel as if there's something to do because a conflict presents itself, but ultimately there's always a sense of regret, of incompleteness on the other side of the excitability that is produced when a conflict really starts to get us going. You know what should get us going? Well, if we value the trajectory of our souls, taking care of all of the monsters under the bed that, when left undealt with, do exacerbate the wars that each and every one of us would prefer to end. Very few of us consciously desires the continuation of anger or turbulence or addiction or misunderstanding within our lives. Again, whether it's with ourselves or with others. But sometimes we just can't help it, can we? We get triggered. Let us vow to always make a dedicated decision to not let our mental and emotional lives unground us and take us away from a very simplistic presence that can melt all conflict, that can melt away all dissatisfaction. But for us to be allotted peace, harmony, groundedness, it takes great work. We have to pay attention. We have to not let ourselves slip in our speech, in our minds, in our actions, in our interactions. And I'm not saying anything you don't already know. All of us carry an intuition, and this intuition speaks volumes day in and day out to us. It tells us what the correct motion to make is, so that conflict can no longer hold us by the throat. And yet we don't always listen to the intuition, do we? It can take training. We have to train ourselves to listen to that inner sacred voice, which sounds like you, but may as well be the voice of God. We have to listen. And if we listen very closely, every time we feel uneasy about a conflict that's presented itself, the solution will always be available. And that solution is always very easy to digest, but not so easy to implement. The solution is calm the waters of the mind, calm the waters of the mind. And through calming the waters of the mind, the storms that you callously play out on the stage of life will get calmer and calmer. Yeah. When we're fighting with ourselves, when we're fighting with others, there's something we're not accepting. And that something is always the truth. The truth always will set us free. And truths can be quite uncomfortable, can't they? Especially when we haven't dealt with what desperately needs to be addressed, so that we don't produce all of these endless dramas. The merry-go-round of the soap opera of life can get so exhausting. So how about we level up? Much of the time, we're just in a pattern of behavior. We don't even really know what we're doing. We're just repeating something over and over and over again. And we need to repeat that which we haven't learned from until the message is clear. This is why, even though consciously we might say to ourselves, I don't want difficulty in my life. Well, difficulty might keep rearing its head. The soap opera of life will only calm down, will only call a truce when we take care of the vital aspects that produced those misaligned situations in the first place. If we're honest, and if we can follow our honesty, then we're on the side of all things holy, of all things expansive, of all things alive. We don't need endless conflict to feel alive. Nobody is forcing you to be this or that. But I think all of us want to be completely enmeshed in beauty, in wisdom, in a presence that's beyond the earthly woes of relational distress and personal shame. And any conflict you can think of, what matters is how we can progressively blossom so that we're not inspiring more conflict than is necessary to send us into a more mature, enlightened, blissful, ascended state. Now, if we're not performing a soap opera, well, then things can take on a more mystical quality, but it takes sacrifice. There is so much that we don't need in our lives when we find ourselves in a landscape of confusion and conflict. What can we release? What do we no longer need? That's a question we can continuously ask ourselves, especially if we don't know what exactly to do. Maybe you don't know where to go from here, what move to make that will add something in your life. Well, then subtract in order to add. to do the best we can is all the divine asks of us if we are actually dedicated to a path of ascensional striving. But let us not be lazy when it comes to our emotional and mental lives. Let's not be lazy when it comes to the actions we're performing and the interactions we're having with others. I'm not claiming these words to be anything spectacular. It's just, I think we all need to hear this every now and then. Let's respect ourselves. Let's respect others. Let's respect our place in creation. To respect all of creation, we have to respect the gifts we've been given. We've been given the gift of feeling. We can feel so much, and we can also abuse our faculties of feeling. There's a lot of advice out there when it comes to reducing our anxiety, getting rid of depression, getting out of a state that just feels pathetic and uninspired. And all of the greatest advice will go something like this: don't avoid the void. There are uncomfortable aspects of yourself, of your past, of your weaknesses. There are deficiencies that you act out, that you even accumulate. And until taking an honest, courageous look at these qualities, wars will keep being fought. There's no magic pill to get rid of our ills. If we exhibit the symptoms of spiritual sickness, which does manifest as conflict in our lives, one conflict after another, then it's time to reevaluate. And we can all do it. We can all snap out of a state of ignorance and stupidity and spiritual blindness. But it doesn't just take a will. It doesn't just take an intention. It takes true dedication. So personally, I vow to strive to get out of that ugly reactivity. Why get triggered when we can all discover an eye within the storm? Centeredness is granted to us through performing the great work and through realizing that we don't need to fight to gain value. The swords and shields that we've all been very much holding on to don't serve anybody. And they definitely don't serve you or I. Life is better when we relinquish the swords and the shields. Life is so much better when we realize I don't have to fight a war to be embodied. I don't have to be right. I don't have to get my exact way. I don't have to stronghold others or myself in order to connect with something beautiful and valuable.